Algae does not wait for permission. One day your glass is clear, the next there is a haze, then threads on the filter intake, then a velvet film across the gravel. If you keep freshwater fish long enough, you meet this side of the hobby. You scrub, you siphon, you change water. It comes back. The truth is simple and stubborn. Algae thrives wherever the balance tips in its favor, and that balance is what we are here to take back. First, let's admit what most guides gloss over. A healthy tank is not a sterile box. It is a living system with microorganisms, plant leaves growing and decaying, tiny crustaceans in the shadows, and yes, a dusting of algae somewhere. Zero algae forever is a myth. The real goal is control. We want algae present in such low amounts that it serves the ecosystem without spoiling the view. That is not only possible, it is reliable once you know the levers and how to pull them. Second, the levers are not mysterious. Algae feeds on light and nutrients, the same resources your plants need. When light runs longer than your plants can use it, algae takes the surplus. When nutrients build up from overfeeding or poor maintenance, algae spends them faster than plants can respond. When circulation is weak and corners grow stale, algae colonizes those quiet spots first. These are not random outbreaks. They are signals that the system is out of tune. Third, you do not need a shelf full of potions to win. We will talk about products and tools, but they are not the heart of the fix. The heart is method. We will look at how to identify the kind of growth in your tank and what it tells you. We will adjust light with intent instead of guessing. We will manage nutrients with simple routines that biologists and experienced aquarists trust. We will add the right plants in the right density so they starve algae before it starts. We will bring in a cleanup crew where it makes sense and skip it where it does not. There is a tough lesson here, and it is worth stating plainly. If algae is booming, it is because you are feeding it. Not on purpose, but through habits that feel normal. Lights left on because the tank looks nice in the evening. A generous second pinch of flakes because the fish beg. A skipped filter rinse because the weekend got busy. Algae rewards that pattern every time. The win is built on small, steady changes that turn the pattern around. So what will you gain if you stay with me? Clarity, in both senses. Water that looks like glass and thinking that is calm and practical. We will untangle the types of algae you are likely to face in freshwater tanks. From the brown dusting that blankets new setups to the stubborn tufts that cling to slow leaves. From the slimy mats that creep across the substrate to the green cloud that turns water into pea soup. You will learn to read their signatures. You will learn what to remove by hand, what to starve, what to outcompete, and what to treat with targeted measures when the situation calls for it. We will keep this grounded. When we talk about light, we will set hours and define intensity ranges. When we talk about nutrients, we will connect feeding, stocking, filtration, and water changes to the numbers you can test. When we talk about plants, we will name fast growers and explain why planting heavy is a strategy and not decoration. When we talk about flow, we will show where dead zones form and how to fix them with small adjustments. When we mention products, we will name types and explain what they do, why they work, and when to pass. You may have tried quick fixes before. You may have dosed an algaecide and watched the growth pale, only to see it return a week later. You may have turned the lights off for 3 days and woken up to a tank that looked better, then watched the problem rebuild by the end of the month. Those are results without a framework. This hour is the framework. By the end, you will have a simple sequence to follow whenever algae shows up, and a routine that keeps it from taking over again. Finally, a promise. We will stay honest about trade-offs. Shorter photoperiods mean less viewing time. Heavier planting means more pruning. A cleanup crew adds life and also bioload. A UV unit clears green water fast, but it is a device to maintain. None of these are magic or free. Each choice pays for stability in a clear way, and you will see the cost and benefit before you commit. If you are ready to stop reacting and start running your tank like a small, balanced ecosystem, you are in the right place. Let us start by meeting algae as it really is. Not as a single problem, but as several distinct growths with their own habits and weak points. Algae in a freshwater aquarium is both a sign of life and a signal that something needs attention. In the wild, algae form a vital base of the food web. In our tanks, a light dusting of green film on the glass or a soft patina on rocks can be entirely normal. Fry graze on it, snails and shrimp harvest it, and a thin biofilm supports communities of bacteria and tiny invertebrates that help break down waste. In that sense, algae can be a friend. The trouble begins when growth outpaces the system's ability to keep it in check. That is when algae turns from part of a living landscape into an invasive carpet that steals light, smothers leaves, and spoils water clarity. To understand both faces of algae, start with how it lives. During the day, algae use light to power photosynthesis, drawing carbon dioxide from the water and building new biomass. Oxygen is released in the process, which can raise dissolved oxygen to very high levels in bright tanks. After lights out, the process flips. Algae, plants, fish, and bacteria all respire and consume oxygen, releasing carbon dioxide. In a tank with a heavy algae load and limited aeration, night can become a pinch point when oxygen dips and fish begin to hover near the surface. Many aquarists only notice algae's impact at this moment, yet the cause is the same imbalance that fed the bloom during the day. Algae also interact with nutrients in direct and important ways. Fish food and waste ultimately become ammonia, then nitrite, then nitrate. Plants prefer to take up ammonium and nitrate when they can. So do algae. When you overfeed or let detritus accumulate, you create a steady nutrient stipend that algae are delighted to spend. If your plants are sparse or struggling, algae get first dibs. This is why tanks with rich plant growth and stable maintenance routines often carry only a faint green film that wipes away in seconds, while neglected tanks sprout hair and fuzz on every surface. It is the same water, but in one system plants and bacteria are winning the race, and in the other algae are. Not all algae are equal, and that matters. A new tank often grows a soft brown dust known as diatoms. These thrive on silicates and low light, and tend to fade as the filter matures and silicate levels drop. A thin green film on glass is common in mature tanks, and is usually the first sign that light and nutrients are slightly ahead of plant demand. Pinpoint green spots on slow leaves and on glass point toward a phosphate and light mismatch. Dark furry tufts on wood or filters signal more stubborn filamentous groups that exploit strong light and trace imbalances. A slimy, dark, sheet-like growth that peels off in mats is usually Cyanobacteria, which is a photosynthetic bacteria and not a true alga. Each of these tells a different story about the conditions in your tank, and reading that story turns guesswork into targeted action. There are reasons to tolerate a little algae beyond simple realism. Periphyton, the mix of algae, microbes, and tiny critters that colonizes hardscape, underpins natural grazing behavior. Many aquarists keeping livebearers, shrimp, or hillstream fish aim for controlled offwooks on rocks because it feeds and enriches their animals. A spotless but sterile tank may look like a showroom, yet it deprives grazers of the microfoods they evolved to pick. The goal is not a showroom that never changes. The goal is a living aquarium where algae exist at low, stable levels that support the rest of the system without taking center stage. When does algae truly become a foe? First, when it blankets plant leaves and reduces photosynthesis. Slow growers like Anubias and Bucephalandra suffer when black tufts cover their blades and block light. Second, when algae clogs intakes and sponges, reducing flow and oxygenation. Third, when free-floating outbreaks turn water into a green fog that limits visibility to a few centimeters and hints at excess nutrients and runaway reproduction. Fourth, when nightly oxygen dips become stressful and fish gasp at the surface. Any one of these is a clear threshold that calls for action. There are also edge cases that deserve respect. Cyanobacteria can produce earthy odors, and in rare circumstances can release toxins. In most home aquariums, the strains involved are less dangerous than the notorious bloom species from lakes, but the risk is not zero. The practical takeaway is simple. Do not let slimy sheets accumulate. Remove what you can, improve circulation and hygiene, and if needed, use targeted treatment with care after you correct the conditions that allowed it. Algae are opportunists and superb colonizers. Spores and fragments drift in the air, ride on plants and decor, and arrive with every net and bucket. You cannot keep them out. What you can do is decide what they find when they land. If light is moderate and predictable, if nutrients are exported routinely, if plants are vigorous and numerous, if flow reaches every corner, algae have little to exploit. If light is long and intense, if feeding is heavy, if filters are clogged, if the substrate is rich in mulm, algae find opportunity on every surface. This is the heart of the friend or foe idea. Algae are not a moral actor in your tank. They reflect your husbandry and your design. A useful mental model is the balance between demand and supply. Demand is what your plants and microbes can use. Supply is the light and nutrients you deliver. When demand exceeds supply, plants slow down and algae also slow down. When supply exceeds demand, algae speed up first because they can grow on almost any surface and can respond quickly to surplus. Your tools are straightforward. Increase demand by planting densely and keeping plants healthy. Reduce supply by trimming light duration and intensity to what your system can use and by feeding modestly and exporting waste on schedule. Improve distribution through circulation so that nutrients, carbon dioxide, and oxygen reach every leaf, and so that dead zones do not accumulate the very conditions algae love. If there is one habit that converts algae from foe back to friend, it is consistency. A weekly rhythm of glass wipe, gravel vacuum, filter floss refresh, and water change removes biomass and the nutrients locked inside it. A simple light timer keeps days and nights steady. A notebook or a few test logs help you spot trends before they swell into visible problems. With that rhythm in place, a faint green tint on the front panel becomes nothing more than a cue that it is cleaning day, not a crisis. Finally, keep perspective. Even expert aquarists scrape glass. Even a beautifully balanced aquascape will show a few green dots after a long photo period. The difference between a peaceful tank and a struggling one is not the total absence of algae. It is whether algae are a thin line in the background or the headline. Treat algae as a teacher. When it swells, it is pointing to an imbalance. When it recedes, it is proof that your adjustments are working. In that way, algae can be both a friend that guides you and a foe you keep politely in its place. Identification and classification start with looking closely, touching carefully, and noting where the growth appears first. Algae types advertise themselves through color, texture, location, and speed. Read those signals and you can tell what you are dealing with and what the tank is trying to say. First, the soft brown dust that coats glass and gravel in young aquariums is almost always diatom algae. It wipes off with a single pass of a sponge and leaves a tan smear on the pad. It favors new setups, low to moderate light, and water with measurable silicate. You often see it on filter outflows and the undersides of leaves where light is weaker. The message is that the system is still maturing and that silicate is available. Diatoms usually fade as bacterial communities and plants strengthen. If the brown film keeps returning month after month, test your source water for silicate, or consider that your sand or decorative rock may be leaching it. Second, the classic thin green coat on glass and hardscape is the everyday green film. It appears fastest on the front panel and on bright faces of rocks and wood. It wipes away easily and returns on the same schedule as your light cycle and feeding. When this is the dominant growth, your balance is close. The tank is saying that light and nutrients slightly exceed plant demand. Shorten the photo period a little or increase plant mass, and this film slows down to a level that a weekly wipe handles without fuss. Third, the stubborn green pinpoints that dot slow leaves, and the front glass are green spot algae. It forms hard discs that resist a sponge. On glass, a sharp blade removes it. On plant leaves, it signals a mismatch between light intensity and available phosphate. You see it most on anubias and other slow growers because they do not shed leaves quickly. The tank is telling you that phosphate may be low relative to light or that your light is running long. Addressing that ratio is more effective than endless scraping. Fourth, the dust that returns within days no matter how often you wipe may be green dust algae. It forms a thin, opaque layer that obscures clarity, yet lifts off in sheets if you leave it long enough. Under a bright light, you can see tiny particles swirling off the glass when you disturb it. This organism has a life cycle on the glass. The reliable method is to let it complete that cycle. Leave it alone for a week or two until it releases, then clean once and reset the light schedule. The tank is saying that the glass surface has become a nursery for this specific alga because conditions were stable and bright. Fifth, the long threads that sway in the current are the hair algae group. This includes green hair, thread algae, and the wiry clumps that snag on moss. Touch it and it feels soft and slippery. Twirl a toothbrush and it winds up like cotton candy. You find it on highlight edges, on filter returns, and on the tips of fast stems where flow and light meet. The message is surplus nutrients paired with strong light, or a gap in plant health that leaves free resources on the table. Reduce photoperiod a little, improve fertilization balance rather than starving the tank, and increase manual removal so plants can catch up. Sixth, staghorn and related gray-green filaments branch like tiny antlers. They prefer areas of strong pulsing flow such as spray bar tips and the lips of filter intakes. The strands are tougher than common hair algae and break off in stiff clumps. The signal here is mechanical as much as chemical. Turbulent flow and trace nutrient imbalance often coincide. Gentle and even circulation helps, along with restoring consistent carbon and micronutrient supply in planted systems, so plants outcompete these opportunists. Seventh, blackbeard algae is the infamous dark fuzz that forms on wood, rock filter housings, and the edges of slow leaves. Up close, it looks like miniature black bushes. It anchors hard and resists pulling. You often see it in zones of strong localized current or near equipment, where light is steady. It points to inconsistent carbon and a surplus of light on static surfaces. It is slow to grow and slow to leave. The telltale reaction is that weakened patches turn red or pale after a few days, when spot treated with a carbon supplement or hydrogen peroxide. That color shift confirms the identification. The long game is to stabilize carbon availability in planted tanks, reduce hotspots of light, and trim or replace infested leaves and decor. Eighth, the slimy, sheet-like growth that peels off in wide skins and smells earthy is blue-green algae, which is cyanobacteria. It blankets sand and creeps up glass and plant bases, often trapping bubbles. It favors dead zones with little flow and areas rich in organic waste. The signal is neglect or stagnation rather than strong light. Siphon it out, deepen gravel vacuuming, and improve circulation. If it returns after these corrections, a targeted antibacterial treatment can finish the job, but only after the underlying causes are addressed. Ninth, the water itself may turn opaque green. That is green water, a bloom of free-floating algae cells. You cannot scrape it off because it is not on the glass. It arrives quickly after a sunbeam hits a nutrient-rich tank, or after an ammonia spike in a new setup. If you hold a white card behind the tank and cannot see it through the water column, you can be confident it is this bloom. The tank is telling you that dissolved nutrients and light aligned perfectly for microscopic algae to multiply faster than filtration can remove them. Control the light and export nutrients, and consider an ultraviolet clarifier to break the cycle. Now consider a few simple field tests that do not require a lab. Rub a small patch between your fingers. Slimy and slippery suggests cyanobacteria. Dusty and powdery suggest diatoms. Coarse and wiry with a grassy smell points to cladophora, a tougher filament that often hitchhikes on moss and feels like fishing line rather than hair. Look for location patterns. Growth that hugs the substrate and cups around plant bases points to low flow and detritus. Growth that appears first on the brightest face of rock or on the outlet of a light fixture points to excess light. Growth that colonizes only slow leaves points to an imbalance that favors spot algae. Observe speed. A haze that returns on the glass in 3 days with strong lighting suggests your photoperiod is long for the current plant demand. Tufts that take weeks to build but never leave without pruning suggest blackbeard algae. Sheets that regrow overnight in the same stagnant corner suggest cyanobacteria with a circulation problem. Speed and placement together let you narrow the type before you even reach for a scraper. Color nuance helps as well. Diatoms are tobacco brown. Green film is fresh lawn green. Green spot is deeper emerald dots. Staghorn is gray-green and looks lifeless even when attached. Blackbeard is true black or very dark olive until weakened. Cyanobacteria ranges from deep green to blue-green and sometimes reddish-brown, always with that telltale slimy shine. Finally, connect identification to a quick diagnostic checklist. What is the age of the tank? New tanks point toward diatoms and green water. What is the light schedule? Very long days push green films and spots. Where does natural sunlight hit? A brief daily beam often explains a bloom. How is flow distributed? Dead corners correlate with slime. What are nitrate and phosphate readings? Nitrate that climbs across the week and phosphate that is either very high or very low can push different green groups. What is the plant mass? Sparse planting hands algae a head start. Note the answers and the algae type together, and you have a map for the fixes that are coming in later sections. Balance in a freshwater aquarium is not a slogan. It is a measurable relationship between light, nutrients, and carbon. When these three are matched to what your plants and microbes can use, algae has little room to expand. When any one of them outruns the others, algae steps into the gap. Think of light as the engine, nutrients as the fuel, and carbon as the air. Starve anyone and growth slows. Oversupply anyone while the others lag and something opportunistic takes off. First, light sets the speed of the system. Brighter light and longer days push photosynthesis faster. That is great only if plants can keep pace. In fish-only tanks without many plants, light is mostly for viewing, so long days serve algae more than fish. In planted tanks, light must match the actual plant biomass and health. A new tank with a few stems and tender roots should run shorter days than a mature aquascape that is dense and vigorous. If you find a haze on the glass by midweek, your light schedule is likely ahead of plant demand. Trim the day by an hour or two and watch for a change. If plants stall and algae rises, light is still ahead of nutrients or carbon. Second, spectrum matters, but not in the way marketing suggests. Plants can use a wide range of white light. The problem is not that a certain color causes algae. The problem is intensity and duration that outstrip uptake. That said, aging fluorescent bulbs drift in output and can favor algae when they dim and shift. Replacing old bulbs on a yearly rhythm and setting a strict day length with a timer removes two common variables. Keep the day steady. Let plants adapt. Algae thrives on inconsistency. Third, nutrients are the currency of growth. Fish food becomes waste. waste becomes ammonia, then nitrite, then nitrate. Phosphate comes from food and sometimes from tap water. Micronutrients like iron are present in trace amounts. Plants and algae both spend these resources. If nitrate and phosphate accumulate faster than your plants can use them, algae will spend the surplus. If phosphate is very low while light is strong, plants slow down and you see green spot algae on slow leaves. If nitrate rises week after week, you are feeding heavier than the system can export. The reliable corrections are modest feeding, consistent gravel vacuuming, and regular water changes that physically remove dissolved fertilizer. Fourth, carbon is the limiting factor more often than hobbyists expect. In low-tech tanks without carbon dioxide injection, plants rely on what carbon enters from fish respiration and surface exchange. During bright hours, that natural supply can run short. When carbon is inconsistent, certain filamentous algae gain an edge, and black-beard algae is a classic sign. You can stabilize carbon in 3 ways. Match light to the plant mass so demand does not outrun supply. Improve gentle circulation so carbon reaches every leaf. Consider adding liquid carbon where appropriate and safe, understanding that it is a biocide and must be dosed carefully. In high-tech tanks, injected carbon dioxide transforms the balance. It lets plants use the light and nutrients you provide. But the rule remains the same. Push light only as far as your carbon and nutrients can support without visible stress. Fifth, flow and oxygen knit the system together. Good circulation distributes nutrients and carbon to plant surfaces and lifts waste to the filter. Dead zones collect detritus and become nurseries for slime. Aim for even movement that ripples the surface enough to exchange gases without blasting plants sideways. At night, when photosynthesis stops, oxygen falls as fish and microbes respire. Strong aeration at night can prevent dips that stress fish and also keeps beneficial bacteria active. Those bacteria compete with algae by processing waste into forms plants can use and by keeping organics from building up into a constant leak of fertilizer. Sixth, temperature influences the pace of everything living in the tank. Warmer water speeds metabolism in fish, microbes, plants, and algae alike. If your species tolerate a slightly cooler setting, dropping a couple of degrees can slow algae enough to let maintenance and plant growth gain ground. Stability matters more than the exact number. Wide swings invite stress, and stress invites outbreaks. Seventh, understand the idea of the limiting factor. Growth is capped by whichever resource is scarcest at that moment. If light is abundant but phosphate is nearly zero, plants cannot use the light efficiently, and algae that tolerates lean conditions will nibble at the margins. If nutrients are abundant but light is weak, both plants and algae crawl. In practice, you want plants to be limited only gently, and never by a hard shortage. Balanced fertilization in planted tanks keeps plants in the lead. In fish-only tanks, removing excess nutrients by water changes is the safer path. Either way, do not let one resource run away while another is stuck at low. Eighth, test and connect numbers to actions. Nitrate that finishes the week above the mid-range suggests larger or more frequent water changes and leaner feeding. Phosphate that is effectively zero in a bright planted tank suggests adding a little through a complete fertilizer so plants do not stall. If you dose iron for plant color and then see a flare of fuzzy threads under strong light, ease back. Numbers are not the goal, they are signals. Track them for a month and you will see how your routine maps to algae pressure. Ninth, read plant health as your dashboard. Pearling leaves and steady new growth mean your balance is close. Pale tips, holes in leaves, and stalled runners mean a shortage or a mismatch. When plants falter, algae is quick to fill open surfaces. Fix the plant need rather than starving the entire tank. Often the right move is counterintuitive. Add a modest amount of missing nutrients while reducing light a little. That combination lets plants catch up without feeding a bloom. 10th, tie the science back to simple habits. Set a firm light period and resist the urge to extend it for evening viewing. Feed with intention and stop before food drifts to the bottom. Rinse mechanical media so flow stays strong. Vacuum detritus, so you are exporting nutrients rather than letting them leach all week. Plant heavily and prune often so you are physically removing nutrients locked in plant tissue. If you inject carbon dioxide, keep it steady day to day and do not chase numbers hour to hour. If you do not inject carbon, keep light on the conservative side and rely on plant mass and water changes to keep balance. The pattern is consistent across all successful aquariums. Match light to what can be used. Keep nutrients in a range that plants can spend fully between water changes. Stabilize carbon and flow so every leaf can work. When these fit together, algae shrinks to a background film that your cleanup crew trims and your weekly cloth wipes away. When they drift apart, algae announces the gap. Use that signal. Adjust the engine, the fuel, or the air, and watch the tank return to clarity. Prevention is the quiet work that keeps algae from ever getting momentum. It is less dramatic than a last-minute rescue, but it is what separates a tank you enjoy from a tank you fight. Think of this section as a set of habits that stack. Each habit shaves away one advantage algae would otherwise use. First, set a weekly rhythm and keep it. A consistent maintenance day does more for algae control than any bottle on a shelf. On that day, you wipe the glass, prune tired leaves, vacuum the substrate, refresh filter floss, and change water. Consistency matters more than perfection. A modest routine repeated on schedule beats a heroic clean done once in a while. Second, use water changes to export nutrients. Partial changes dilute nitrate and phosphate and remove dissolved organics that feed blooms. For a typical community tank, aim for roughly 1/4 to 1/3 of the water each week. Match temperature within a couple of degrees to avoid stress. Always dechlorinate tap water before it reaches the fish. If your tap water carries noticeable nitrate or phosphate, consider mixing in reverse osmosis or deionized water, or run a phosphate removal media in the filter to keep baseline levels low. Third, vacuum the substrate with intent. Detritus is slow fertilizer. Use a gravel siphon to lift and draw debris from between stones without stripping the entire bed bare. Divide the tank footprint into sections and clean a different set each week. That approach prevents deep anaerobic pockets while leaving enough microbial life to keep the system stable. In planted tanks, focus the siphon on open areas and around hardscape, and pluck decaying leaves rather than uprooting carpets. Fourth, keep the filter moving free and easy. Mechanical media traps the very fine particles that would otherwise decay into nutrients. Rinse sponges and floss in a bucket of tank water so you do not shock the bacteria with chlorinated tap. Rotate deep cleans so you never scrub every piece of media on the same day. Replace fine pads before they clog and force water to bypass. A clear path through the filter keeps oxygen high and waste processing steady, which deprives algae of the constant trickle of fuel it loves. Fifth, feed with care. Every pinch that sinks uneaten becomes algae food. Watch your fish rather than the clock. Offer small portions and stop when interest slows. A fast day once a week helps more than it hurts for most species. Rinse frozen foods in a net to wash away nutrient-rich juices. Choose pellets that hold together rather than powders that break into a fog. If you see snail populations booming or the substrate collecting crumbs, the tank is telling you that your feed rate is ahead of what the community can use. Sixth, control light with a timer instead of a mood. Fish do not need bright display lighting all day and all evening. In fish-only tanks, 6 to 8 hours of light is often enough for viewing and keeps algae pressure low. In planted tanks, 8 to 10 hours is a sensible starting point, tuned up or down as plant mass and growth demand change. Keep lights off when the room is flooded with sun, and keep the tank out of direct beams. A simple outlet timer removes human forgetfulness from the equation and converts guesswork into a repeatable day length. Seventh, set intensity to what the system can use. High output fixtures over a lightly planted tank create surplus energy that algae will spend first. If your plants are few or slow, lower the brightness or raise the fixture to spread and soften light. Replace aging fluorescent tubes on a yearly cycle to avoid spectral drift. With modern LEDs, reduce output rather than stretching day length to compensate for plant needs. The goal is steady and moderate rather than brilliant and fluctuating. Eighth, fix flow patterns that create dead zones. Algae and cyanobacteria take root where water stalls and detritus settles. Aim filter outlets so water traces a broad loop along the front glass, down the far side, and back along the substrate. Use a spray bar to distribute flow gently. Add a small circulation pump if you see leaves barely moving in corners or if mulm collects behind wood. Surface ripple should be enough to shimmer light without churning. That ripple increases gas exchange, which supports bacteria and keeps carbon dioxide swings gentler. Ninth, add simple pre-filters to catch the fluff. A sponge on the filter intake traps fine debris before it packs the canister. That sponge is easy to rinse during your weekly routine, and every rinse is nutrients removed before they dissolve. A turkey baster is a surprisingly helpful tool to puff detritus out of moss and rock crevices so the filter can grab it. 10th, manage source water before it reaches the tank. If your municipal water contains chloramine rather than chlorine, choose a conditioner that breaks both the chlorine bond and binds the ammonia. If phosphate tests high out of the tap, run a small reactor or a media bag with iron-based phosphate remover in the filter until levels fall. If hardness is extreme for your species and plants, blend with purified water to bring carbonate hardness into a stable middle range. Stable source chemistry makes every other habit more effective. 11th, keep live plants working for you even if you do not run a high-tech setup. Fast growers like hornwort, water sprite, And floating rosettes pull nitrogen and phosphorus from the column and shade lower zones where films would otherwise gain ground. Plant densely, then prune and remove trimmings during water changes. Every handful of stems you compost is nutrients exported that algae will never see. 12th, quarantine and clean new additions. Algae spores travel on plants and decor. Rinse new plants under running water. If you want to start cleaner, use a brief dip in a mild bleach solution at a ratio of 1:10 with water, then rinse thoroughly in dechlorinated water. For delicate species, use a gentler alum soak. This is not mandatory, but it reduces the chance that tough filaments hitch a ride into your aquascape. 13th, watch the numbers without chasing them. Test nitrate and phosphate weekly for a month and write the results. If nitrate climbs into the high range by the end of each week, increase the percentage of water you change or reduce feeding. If phosphate is effectively zero in a bright planted tank and green spot increases, add a complete fertilizer lightly, so plants do not stall. If both nutrients are high and plants are sparse, combine heavier planting with larger water changes until demand and supply meet. 14th, set night conditions to avoid oxygen dips. In tanks with heavy plant mass or with noticeable algae, consider running an air stone after lights out. That simple step prevents the dawn lull where fish cluster at the surface. It also keeps beneficial bacteria active through the night, which steadies the whole cycle. 15th, make the routine frictionless so you keep doing it. Keep a siphon, bucket, algae magnet, and towels within reach of the tank. Pre-mark a bucket with a line for your usual change volume. Put a calendar reminder on the day you chose. The easier the start, the more likely you will stay on schedule. Algae control is earned in these small conveniences. Prevention is not glamorous, but it is the most powerful method you have. When light is on a timer, feeding is modest, filters breathe, water changes are regular, and plants are growing, algae becomes a background film that you wipe without thinking. The tank looks better, the fish behave better, and your time shifts from crisis response to quiet enjoyment. Manual removal is the fast reset that gives your longer-term fixes room to work. Done well, it clears biomass without stressing fish or plants, and it prevents the cleaned algae from dissolving back into nutrients. Think of it as a sequence rather than a single act. The order matters. First, prepare the tank for work. Switch off the heater if you plan to drop the water level so the glass around it does not heat and crack in air. Leave the filter running for now so it can trap what you dislodge. Slip a clean pre-filter sponge over the intake or add a wad of fine floss to the filter path to catch the bloom of particles you are about to create. Lay towels, fill your bucket, and have a siphon, algae pad, plastic scraper, razor for glass only, a soft toothbrush, and a turkey baster within reach. Second, start with the glass. Use a dedicated algae magnet or pad to take off the easy film from front and side panels. On glass tanks, a new razor blade will lift green spot algae that laughs at soft pads. Keep the blade flat to the pane and draw it in long strokes. On acrylic, never use a metal blade. Use a plastic scraper or an old credit card. Rinse pads as you go so you do not grind grit across the surface. Clean from top to bottom so debris falls where the siphon will collect it. Third, move to hardscape. Driftwood, rocks, and equipment housings trap the kind of fuzz that grows back first. Use the toothbrush in small circles to rough up filaments. Do not aim to make it perfect in one pass. The goal is to detach most of the mass so the filter and siphon can remove it from the system. On stubborn tufts at the lip of an outlet, or on the face of a diffuser, a firm brush and a blast from the turkey baster will dislodge clumps without tearing plants. If a piece of decor is small and heavily infested, lift it out, scrub it under tap water, and set it aside to rinse in dechlorinated water before it returns. That choice is often faster and cleaner than hours of in-tank fussing. Fourth, treat plants with care. Healthy leaves are worth more than a flawless look today. Trim and remove leaves that are heavily coated rather than trying to scrub them in place. On slow growers like Anubias and Bucephalandra, clipping the worst leaves speeds recovery and keeps the plant from wasting energy on damaged tissue. For hair algae on moss or fine stems, twirl a toothbrush into the strands and wind them out in long ropes. Work methodically so you do not uproot carpets or tear runners. A gentle puff from the turkey baster helps lift loosened threads so you can catch them with the siphon. Fifth, use the siphon as you clean, not only after. Start a strong siphon and chase the falling debris. Skim just above the substrate to collect the cloud without sucking up gravel. When you reach open sand, bury the siphon mouth lightly to pull detritus from the top layer and leave clean grains behind. Divide the floor into zones and clear 1 or 2 zones per session. That pattern keeps the bed aerobic and prevents releasing deep pockets of waste all at once. Pause often to rinse the pad or brush and to empty the bucket so you are always removing rather than redistributing. Sixth, apply spot treatments only where needed and with precision. For black beard patches on rock or wood, a targeted stream of hydrogen peroxide from a syringe will oxidize the filaments. Keep the stream tight to the growth. Wait a few minutes, then resume circulation so the peroxide disperses and breaks down. Expect the treated tufts to pale or redden over the next days, after which they pull more easily. A liquid carbon product used as a spot dab works similarly. Always keep doses conservative and limit treatment to a few small areas per session, so fish and biofilter are not challenged. If you remove decode to treat it, rinse well in dechlorinated water before it goes back. Seventh, handle cyanobacteria differently. Its slimy mats tear into sheets. Set the siphon mouth right at the leading edge and peel the sheet toward the flow so it slides in whole rather than dissolving into strands. Work the worst zones first, usually low-flow corners and the base of stems. After a broad removal, deepen gravel vacuuming in those zones to pull out the soft mulm that fuels its return. You are aiming to take out biomass and also the food source beneath it in the same pass. Eighth, know when to hold off cleaning a surface. Green dust algae has a life cycle on glass. If you wipe it every day, you extend the cycle. When you recognize that opaque green veil that lifts in sheets, leave it alone for a week and then clean once with a full water change. That single purge, paired with a shorter, steady photoperiod, resets it for good. Ninth, clear the water column before you finish. After the main scrub and siphon, run a polishing pass. Add new fine floss to the filter and let it run for an hour while you tidy tools. Then perform the planned partial water change to export what the filter trapped. This two-step of mechanical polish, followed by freshwater, prevents the classic mistake of scrubbing a tank spotless and then leaving all the fine matter to rot in the filter and circulate back as fertilizer. 10th, service the filter the day after a big clean. Rinse sponges and replace the temporary floss so trapped algae does not decay in the dark. Never strip a filter to bare media on the same day as a large water change. Stagger tasks so beneficial bacteria stay abundant and water remains stable. 11th, match manual methods to algae types to save time. Diatom film in young tanks wipes away with a pad and often does not return once the system matures. Green film is a quick magnet pass once a week. Green spot on glass needs a blade. And on leaves, it is better solved by pruning and adjusting phosphate than by scrubbing. Hair algae comes out cleanly with the toothbrush twirl, plus steady reductions in light surplus. Staghorn breaks off as stiff wisps, so chase the fragments with the siphon and correct flow patterns that hammer one spot. Blackbeard is a trim and treat target, slow to beat but very manageable with patient spot work and stable carbon. Cyanobacteria is a peel and siphon job, paired with deeper cleaning of the detritus pockets it loves. 12th, keep stress low for livestock during the process. Work with calm, steady motions. Avoid stirring thick clouds for long periods. If fish begin to gasp near the surface during heavy cleaning, pause and add aeration while you continue. Feed lightly or not at all on the cleaning day, so you are not adding food to a tank already rich in disturbed organics. 13th, finish with a reset checklist. Replace the pre-filter sponge or rinse it clean. Restore water level and restart the heater. Set the light to a conservative day length for the coming week so regrowth does not immediately gain speed. Note what you removed and where it was worst. Those notes guide the preventive adjustments you will make in lighting, feeding, flow, and planting. Manual removal is not a war of attrition. It is a clean cut followed by export. Done in a deliberate sequence, it can turn a tired tank bright in an hour and set the stage for the slower but deeper changes that starve new growth. Approve when ready, and I will continue to Section 6 on biological control with algae-eating fish, snails, and shrimp, and how to choose and support them so they help without creating new problems. Biological control recruits living helpers that graze, scrape, and sift algae every hour you are not looking. It works best as part of a balanced plan rather than as a lone fix. The goal is simple. Add the right mouths in the right numbers, support them so they keep working, and avoid species that create bigger problems than they solve. First, know what each grazer actually eats. The Siamese algae eater, Crossachilus oblongus, is one of the few fish that will pick at blackbeard algae once it softens. It also trims hair algae and keeps biofilm down on hardscape. It grows to about 15 centimeters and stays active, so it suits medium and large tanks. A bristlenose pleco and cistrus species excels at grazing soft films and diatom dust on glass and wood. It stays smaller than common plecos and is far more suitable for home aquariums. Otocinclus catfish specialize in diatom film and soft green coats, working gently on leaves that larger sucker mouths might damage. Florida flagfish, Jordanella florida, are persistent nibblers on hair algae, though they can nip fins in tight quarters. Mollies and other live bearers browse lighter films and thread-like growths between feedings. Second, do not add a grazer that will outgrow or uproot the tank. Common plecos reach sizes and waste output that overwhelm community aquariums. Chinese algae eaters often stop eating algae as they mature and can harass tank mates. Goldfish dig and graze but uproot plants and produce heavy waste. Choose species that match your layout. A planted 30-gallon tank pairs well with a small group of autosynclists and a bristlenose, not with a common pleco. Third, shrimp are small but mighty when used in numbers. Amano shrimp, Caridina multidentata, are legendary in planted tanks because they gather on tufts of hair algae and pick them down over days. They also clean leftover food before it decays. They do best in groups rather than as single mascots. Cherry shrimp, Neocaridina davidi, are excellent film and biofilm grazers and multiply readily under good conditions. They cannot handle heavy predation. If your fish would view shrimp as snacks, choose larger Amano shrimp or stick with snails and fish. Fourth, snails turn relentless grazing into a background process. Nearite snails are the glass specialists. They scrape green spot algae from panels and stones that softer mouths ignore. They do not breed in freshwater, so 1 or 2 in a small tank and a handful in a larger tank will not become a wave. Mystery snails, Pomacea diffusa, consume films and leftover food and are easy to observe, though they add noticeable bioload. Malaysian trumpet snails burrow through the substrate all night and keep detritus from sealing into dense pockets. Ramshorn snails clean films and tend to multiply only when excess food is present, which makes their numbers a useful signal about feeding. Fifth, stock for teams, not lone heroes. Autosynclists thrive in groups of 6 or more because they are social and feel safer while grazing in the open. Amano shrimp work cooperatively on clumps that a single shrimp would ignore. Neurites do not need company to eat but distribute coverage better when you add a few. 1 bristlenose is usually enough for a community tank because individuals will claim territories. Sixth, support the crew so they keep eating algae rather than starving. Grazers cannot live on glass alone in a sparkling clean tank. Offer sinking wafers, blanched zucchini or spinach, or a pinch of quality algae pellets after lights out so nocturnal workers can feed without competition. Rotating a couple of foods prevents nutritional gaps. For shrimp, stable hardness and a source of calcium support healthy molts. For autosynclists, a mature tank with steady biofilm is more important than supplemental food alone. Many losses happen when these fish are added to sterile new setups with little to graze. Seventh, match water and temperament. Bristlenose and autosynclists prefer clean, well-oxygenated water and steady temperatures in the low to mid-20s Celsius. Amano shrimp handle a range, but need steady parameters and copper-free water. Flagfish do best with space and sturdy tank mates. Siamese algae eaters are active swimmers that benefit from open lanes and secure lids. Before buying, confirm adult size, schooling needs, and compatibility with your fish and plants. Eighth, quarantine and acclimate. New grazers carry the same risks as any fish. A brief quarantine lets you observe for disease and ensures the animals are eating before they join the main display. Slow drip acclimation is worth the extra time, especially for shrimp that react badly to sudden changes in hardness and pH. A careful start means you are adding workers, not stress. Ninth, plan for the waste they produce. Every grazer converts algae and leftover food into ammonia. A bristlenose produces more waste than an autosynclus. A cluster of snails adds load even if you rarely notice it. Fold this into your maintenance schedule. Slightly increase water change volume and rinse pre-filters more often after you add a cleanup crew. The aim is net export. You want their grazing to remove more algae than their waste returns as nutrients. 10th, use them where they have leverage. Autosynclists shine on broadleaf plants and panels where they can graze calmly. Neorites excel on glass and rocks where spot algae forms. Amano shrimp target hairy clumps and leftover food in moss and crevices. Siamese algae eaters patrol pipes and edges that gather black tufts. Place hardscape and flow so these workers have easy access to problem zones. A spray bar that evens out current helps timid grazers venture into the open. 11th, accept the limits. No fish eats every kind of algae in every phase. Most will not touch fresh black-beard algae until it weakens. Few graze Cyanobacteria at all. Green water is invisible to them because it floats in the water column. Grazers are not a substitute for correcting light, nutrients, and flow. They are the finishing crew that keeps small growths from becoming large ones once the system is tuned. 12th, avoid the impulse to overstock helpers. Doubling the number of snails will not fix a phosphate and light mismatch. Adding a second bristle nose to a small tank creates territory stress and extra waste without doubling cleaning power. Start conservatively, observe, and add only if there is obvious remaining food for them to work on. 13th, plan for life stages. Siamese algae eaters that are tireless juveniles can become less focused as adults. Mystery snails lay egg clutches above the waterline that you may wish to remove to control numbers. Cherry shrimp populations boom and then plateau based on food and predation. Revisit your roster every few months and adjust it to the current needs of the tank rather than to the memory of a past outbreak. 14th, think of them as educators. Grazers often reveal where the system is weak. If every nearite spends its hours on the front panel, you likely have long days or direct light on that face. If shrimp congregate in one low corner, detritus is settling there and flow needs correction. Watch where the crew works hardest and use that map to refine light, feeding, and circulation. Finally, build a simple checklist before you buy. Identify the type of algae you want help with. Confirm the adult size and behavior of the grazer. Check compatibility with your fish and plants. Decide how many the tank can support. Plan the backup foods you will provide. Set a quarantine space. When you follow that sequence, biological control becomes a quiet, ongoing service. It reduces the time you spend scrubbing and increases the time you spend observing a living system doing some of the work for you. Chemical and high-tech tools are accelerators. They clear specific problems fast and buy time for the deeper fixes you set in place through husbandry, planting, and balanced light and nutrients. They are not replacements for that foundation. Use them with intention, in the right order, and with respect for their limits and side effects. First, set your rule of use. Reach for tools when the algae problem is defined, the root causes are already being corrected, and you need targeted relief to protect livestock or restore visibility. If light is still excessive or waste is still accumulating, chemicals will only create a lull before the next flare. Treat after you clean, after you shorten the photoperiod, after you tighten feeding, and after you restore flow. Then they work for you, rather than against you. Second, understand liquid algicides. Many commercial products suppress or kill algae with quaternary ammonium compounds or herbicide actives. They can clear soft films and free-floating cells quickly. They also place stress on fish and invertebrates and can injure delicate plants if overdosed. When algae dies all at once, the decay can strip oxygen and spike ammonia. If you ever choose this route, run strong aeration, monitor water quality daily, and perform follow-up water changes to export dead biomass. In planted aquariums and community tanks, routine reliance on broad-spectrum algicides is unwise. They mask imbalance rather than resolve it. Third, use liquid carbon with precision. Products sold as carbon supplements for plants often contain glutaraldehyde or related aldehydes. At label doses, they can slow algae growth. Applied directly to stubborn patches with a syringe during a maintenance session, they will weaken blackbeard algae and other filaments, which then pale and pull more easily. Keep spot treatments small, turn off flow for a few minutes to keep the liquid where you placed it, then restore circulation. Never exceed total daily limits. Sensitive plants and shrimp can react to heavy use. Think of this as a scalpel, not a spray. Fourth, hydrogen peroxide is an effective oxidizer when used sparingly. 3% household peroxide can be dripped onto tufts on wood or rock with good effect. It breaks down into water and oxygen, so it does not leave residues. Limit the total amount per session and focus on a few targets rather than blanketing the tank. Fish should not be exposed to large in-tank doses. Out-of-water spot treatments on removed decor are safer for heavy infestations. Rinse well in dechlorinated water before returning items to the aquarium. Fifth, treat cyanobacteria with a two-stage plan. Start by peeling away mats with the siphon, deep cleaning detritus pockets, and improving circulation and aeration. If the slime returns after these corrections, a measured course of an antibiotic that targets cyanobacteria, such as erythromycin, can end the cycle. Remove carbon or resins from the filter so they do not absorb the dose. Increase aeration during treatment. Watch ammonia and nitrite since a portion of the microbial community may be affected. After the course, perform a large water change and refresh mechanical media. Resume normal maintenance and keep the system clean so the slime does not find the same conditions again. Sixth, clear green water with ultraviolet sterilization. A UV unit passes water over a lamp that emits germicidal light. Free-floating algae cells are damaged as they flow through and lose the ability to multiply, which allows the filter to remove them faster than they reproduce. Proper sizing and flow rate matter. Too fast and contact time is short. Too slow and you are polishing the same water while the rest of the tank remains cloudy. Place the unit where all circulation eventually passes through it. Keep the quartz sleeve clean, and replace the lamp on schedule since output declines with age. UV is excellent for pea soup water and helpful as ongoing prevention in bright or heavily stocked systems. It will not remove algae already attached to surfaces. 7th, consider diatom and fine polishing filters as a surgical cleanup. Diatomaceous earth filters trap particles down to a very small size, including microalgae. They are often used for a few hours to restore clarity after a bloom or a deep maintenance session. Fine floss cartridges or canister pads can serve a similar role, though at a larger particle size. The method is simple. Run the polisher long enough to collect the haze, then remove or rinse the media so it does not become a nutrient source in the dark. 8th, remove nutrients directly with chemical media where appropriate. Iron-based phosphate removers and aluminum-based binders can strip phosphate from the water column and starve algae. Use them in a filter bag placed in high flow or in a small reactor for steady contact. Replace media when it is exhausted. In planted tanks, avoid driving phosphate to zero since that will stall plants and invite spot algae on slow leaves. Aim for reduction, not elimination. There are also resins that absorb dissolved organics, which can lower the baseline fuel available to algae when husbandry cannot be intensified. 9th, understand flocculants and water clarifiers. These products cause fine particles, including microalgae, to clump so filters can catch them. They can make a cloudy tank look clear quickly. They do not fix the cause and can clog filters if overused. If you choose one after a bloom, follow with filter maintenance and a water change so the captured material leaves the system. 10th, consider source water control as a high-leverage tool. If tap water brings in notable nitrate, phosphate, or silicate, these arrive at every water change. Reverse osmosis deionization units strip these to near zero, allowing you to remineralize to the hardness and alkalinity your fish and plants need. Even mixing a portion of purified water with tap can cut problem inputs and reduce diatoms and blooms in sensitive setups. 11th, decide with a simple flowchart. For green water that turns the tank opaque, choose ultraviolet sterilization or a diatom polish after you reduce light and correct nutrients. For persistent cyanobacteria that returns to the same low-flow corners, remove biomass, fix flow, and if it recurs, dose an antibiotic course carefully. For blackbeard algae anchored to wood and equipment, pair pruning with spot applications of liquid carbon or peroxide and stabilize carbon and light. For hair algae that tangles in stems, manual removal and balance adjustments are superior to chemicals. For green spot on glass, use blades and correct the light to phosphate ratio rather than adding a kill agent. Let each problem direct you to the narrowest tool that addresses it. 12th, protect livestock every step of the way. Increase aeration during any treatment that will cause die-off. Treat only part of the tank at a time if you keep sensitive species. Remove carbon during medication so the dose remains effective, then reinstall fresh carbon after the course to clear residues if desired. Never stack multiple treatments together. Choose one intervention, measure the response for a week, then decide on the next move. 13th, plan the exit. Chemical and tech tools should not become permanent crutches unless they serve a clear role such as continuous UV on a sunlit room tank. After a bloom is cleared or a patch is weakened, shift the workload back to your routine. Resume strict light control, modest feeding, and regular exports. Add plant mass if the system is sparse. Keep filters breathing and dead zones swept. That is how you convert short-term intervention into long-term stability. Finally, write down what you used, when, and what changed. Good notes prevent the cycle of repeated guessing and help you see which tools actually moved the needle in your system. The pattern is consistent. Clean first, correct the cause, then apply the narrow tool at a measured dose, followed by export and observation. Use this way, chemicals and devices stop being shortcuts and become smart levers that support a balanced aquarium. A long-term control plan turns scattered fixes into a steady routine that keeps algae in the background. It starts with a clear picture, proceeds with consistent habits, and relies on simple triggers that tell you when to act. Follow this sequence and your tank stays predictable week after week. First, take a baseline snapshot. Note tank volume, livestock, filter, light model, daily light hours, and service dates. Test nitrate and phosphate and write the numbers. Photograph the full tank and a close view of the worst area from the same angle each week. This record anchors decisions in facts rather than guesses. Second, stabilize the day. Put lights on a timer and pick a conservative photo period. For planted communities, 8 hours is a strong default. For fish-focused tanks, 6 to 8 hours works well. Hold that schedule for at least 2 weeks while you adjust other variables. Stability outruns constant tweaks. Third, lock a weekly rhythm. Choose a fixed day. Wipe glass, prune tired leaves, vacuum 1 or 2 floor zones, rinse pre-filters and fine pads in tank water, and change 1/4 to 1/3 of the water. Do tasks in the same order so they become second nature. Algae loses momentum when you are consistent. Fourth, build export into every step. Every leaf you trim and every cup you siphon carries nutrients out. Mark a line on the bucket for your usual change so you do not guess. Skim the dustiest corner first so the filter traps less. Rinse frozen food to shed rich juices. These small details lower the baseline fuel algae can spend. Fifth, feed to behavior. Offer small portions. When interest drops, stop. If you see snails multiplying or notice crumbs in the gravel, reduce rations. If bellies look round yet nitrate climbs by week's end, reduce a little more. Feeding is your quickest lever and the most common source of excess nutrients. Sixth, give plants the advantage. Cover most substrate with fast growers and support them with sturdy rhizome plants on hardscape. In planted tanks, dose a complete fertilizer lightly and regularly so plants never stall. If you do not inject carbon dioxide, keep light modest and rely on plant mass and water changes. If you do inject, keep carbon steady and nudge light only when plants clearly keep pace. Seventh, design flow to erase weak spots. Aim outlets so water traces a broad loop and ripples the surface without battering leaves. Watch a pinch of fine food and see where it settles. If it piles in a corner, adjust the outlet or add a gentle circulator. Algae loves stillness. You are designing against stillness. Eighth, define simple thresholds that trigger action. If nitrate finishes the week above your comfort range, increase the change volume. If green spot dots slow leaves, shorten the day by 1 hour or raise phosphate slightly. If hair tufts appear on bright tips, pull them with a toothbrush and lower intensity a notch while keeping trace dosing complete. If cyanobacteria sheets form in a low corner, siphon them whole, deepen cleaning in that zone, and add aeration at night. Clear thresholds prevent overreaction and prevent drift. Ninth, keep a precise toolbox and know when to use each tool. A blade removes green spot on glass. A toothbrush twirls out hair. Hydrogen peroxide or a liquid carbon spot dab weakens blackbeard so it can be pruned. Ultraviolet clears pea soup water after you correct light and nutrients. An antibiotic course is reserved for recurring cyanobacteria once flow and hygiene are corrected. Pick the narrowest tool that matches the problem. 10th, plan for new tanks and resets. Front-load plant mass and keep fish load light. Expect brown diatom dust early. Wipe and continue. Hold the day length steady rather than long. Extend viewing time only after plants root, filters mature, and algae pressure stays low. 11th, account for seasons and surroundings. A moving sunbeam can ignite green water or coat one face of rock. Note when and where natural light hits and block it during peak hours if needed. Warm rooms push metabolism and algae pace. If your species allow it, lower the heater set point by a degree or two in hot periods to ease oxygen stress and slow growth. 12th, schedule equipment care. Replace aging fluorescent tubes yearly. Clean the quart sleeve on an ultraviolet unit monthly if you run one. Rinse canister hoses so flow does not fade as biofilm builds. Swap fine pads before they clog and force bypass. Small drifts in hardware often explain sudden algae swings. 13th, control source water before it reaches the glass. If tap water carries nitrate, phosphate, or silicate, you add them at each change. Treat or blend with purified water to reduce inputs. If your supply uses chloramine, choose a conditioner that handles both chlorine and ammonia. Clean source water amplifies the effect of every other habit. 14th, keep the cleanup crew working without overstocking. Add autosynclus only to mature tanks with biofilm. Keep a pair or two of neorites for panels and rocks. Support shrimp and snails with a light snack after lights out if the tank is very clean. Match numbers to available food so they assist rather than add needless waste. 15th, document and review. Keep a one-page log with date, light hours, nitrate and phosphate, any spot treatments, and brief observations. Take a photo on maintenance day from the same angle. After a month, you will see patterns that memory misses and can adjust hours, feeding, or planting with confidence. 16th, keep an emergency plan. If a bloom suddenly turns the water opaque, cut light, do a larger change, clean the filter path, and install an ultraviolet clarifier if available. If fish gasp near dawn, add an air stone at night until plant mass and algae loads settle. Protect oxygen while you work the slower levers. 17th, prepare for travel. Before you leave, shorten the day by an hour, perform a thorough maintenance session, and use a vacation feeder or pre-measured portions. Algae thrives on long light and heavy feeding. Remove both while you are away. 18th, scale to volume. Nanos change fast, so smaller but more frequent water changes and gentle handling are safer. Large tanks resist swings but hide detritus if you skip vacuuming. The principles do not change. Only the doses and pace do. 19th, run a quick monthly audit. Ask 5 questions. Is the light schedule still right for current plant mass? Do nitrate and phosphate finish the week in range? Does flow reach every corner? Is there a surface where algae always starts? Did any equipment slip past service? Fix small answers now and large problems never form. Finally, reset your expectations. A faint film on the front panel by week's end is normal in a living system. You wipe it during your routine and move on. Success is not the total absence of growth. Success is ease of control. With a baseline snapshot, a stable day, a weekly rhythm, steady export, dense planting, tuned feeding, even flow, and a few precise tools, you direct the story. Algae becomes a meter of balance rather than a driver of chaos. First, measure light as a daily dose, not a noon snapshot. Build a light profile with a handheld lux meter or a calibrated phone app. Mark a simple grid and take readings near the surface, mid-water, and at the substrate early, mid, and late in the day. Record the pattern, not just the peak. Then adjust fixture height, dimming, or beam spread so bright shelves and dim hollows align with your planting plan. The reason light drives everything else was covered earlier in the science of balance. Second, turn current from a number into a map. Release a slow thread of microbubbles from an airline behind wood, along the floor, and near the back glass. Watch where particles stall, spin, or sweep away. Nudge outlet angles a few degrees, rotate a spray bar, or add a very small helper pump aimed past obstructions until those pockets clear without blasting leaves. The basic prevention logic for circulation was discussed earlier. This is the high-resolution pass that reveals hidden traps. Third, track nutrient relationships rather than chasing single targets. Log nitrate and phosphate on the same weekday and graph 4 weeks. You are aiming for a stable relationship that matches your planting style. If nitrogen trends lean while phosphate stays measurable under strong light, films often get first bite. If phosphate clings near zero while light is high, slow leaves tend to pepper with hard dots. Make small adjustments and watch the pair move together. The biochemical reasoning behind this was covered earlier when we explored how light, nutrients, and carbon interact. Fourth, profile carbon delivery with a dawn curve if you inject gas. Start carbon 30 minutes before lights on. Log pH every 15 minutes for 2 hours, then again at midday. A smooth, repeatable drop that reaches the target by lights on, followed by a steady midday line, means the engine is synchronized. If the curve staggers or drifts between days, refine diffuser placement, surface ripple, or needle valve until the line repeats. Earlier, we talked about why stability matters more than a single headline number. This is how you prove it. Fifth, run micro-experiments that answer binary questions quickly without upsetting the tank. Keep each to 7 days and change one variable. The phosphate bump test for dots on slow leaves raises phosphate slightly while keeping light constant. Clean new leaves confirm that starvation, not technique, was the cue. The brightness notch test for threads at stem tips lowers intensity 1 click, while nutrients hold steady. Clear new tips point to a prior peak that outpaced uptake. The local glare test for epiphytes tapes. A small card outside the glass to cast soft shade across a single leaf for 5 days. If growth retreats only inside the patch, relocate that plant or redirect the beam. The relocation test for stubborn tufts moves one affected stone into a different current path. If regrowth clings to the old spot rather than the stone, the driver was local hydraulics, not global settings. Sixth, seed the right microbes where you want them. Keep a thin slice of mature, inert biomedia in an established filter as a starter. During a rebuild, or after a heavy scrub, tuck that slice behind hardscape near the outflow for a month, then remove it. You are giving fresh glass a head start with communities that spend dissolved organics quickly, denying opportunists their foothold. Seventh, install sentinel tiles as early warning. Hang 2 small unglazed ceramic squares on the back wall, one high and one low. Check them on maintenance day. If the upper tile dulls first, your peak is running hot or stray light is landing. If the lower tile hazes first, the floor needs more movement. Sentinels turn vague impressions into a reliable dashboard and let you correct before the front pane shows it. Eighth, offload nutrient pressure with a harvestable sink outside the display. A slim freshwater scrubber is a rough lit surface fed by a slow trickle from the return line. It grows what you do not want on wood and glass. You scrape it twice a week and throw the biomass away. This is a utility for heavily fed systems where you want uptake you can remove on cue. It complements routine husbandry rather than replacing it. Ninth, audit your test workflow so the trends you act on are real. Rinse vials with tank water 3 times before sampling. Read color blocks under the same lamp every week. Replace reagents on schedule. Cross-check a key parameter with a different kit once a season. If 2 kits disagree on absolute values, trust the direction and keep to one method so week-to-week comparisons are consistent. 10th, check thermal microzones. Place a small digital probe near the substrate under dense growth and another near the surface in open water. If you see more than a small spread, the system is stratifying, often mirroring weak movement in the lower layer. A gentle outlet tweak that lifts the cool pocket can end a persistent haze where numbers and light looked fine. 11th, manage hardscape chemistry upstream. Before a rebuild, soak candidate rocks and sands in a bucket of conditioned water for a week and test alkalinity and conductance at the start and end. Choose inert materials that do not push the system quietly in the background. This prevents long, puzzling drifts that look like husbandry errors but originate in the decor. 12th, set a clarity metric you can check without instruments. Choose one back wall marker, such as a small white tile behind plants, and note on maintenance day how many days pass before you see soft haze between cleanings at your current light schedule. That days to haze number is a simple, honest indicator of pressure. When it shortens, respond with the specific levers already established earlier rather than guessing. 13th, keep a spare food rock for your grazer team. In a separate tub with bright light, let a spare stone develop a mature film. Rotate it into the display overnight once a week when the tank is very clean so grazers have steady work without letting nuisance films take root on your layout. Compatibility and stocking guidance was addressed earlier when we discussed grazer behavior and load. These are finer instruments, not bigger hammers. They let you measure dose rather than brightness, see current paths rather than pump ratings, read nutrient relationships rather than single values, and nudge the system before small drifts become weekly chores. Use them to keep a good tank easy. We have walked the long road from haze on the glass to a tank that runs clean and calm. The lesson beneath every step is simple. Algae is not a villain that sneaks in from nowhere. It is a signal. When light outruns demand, when nutrients pile up, when carbon and flow are uneven, algae answers first. When those pieces are aligned, it fades into the background and your aquarium becomes the quiet, living system you wanted from the start. First, you learned to read what you see. Brown dust in a new setup points to diatoms and silicate. Hard green dots on slow leaves tell you light and phosphate are out of step. Long threads on bright tips point to surplus energy and a gap in plant health. Slimy sheets in still corners say detritus and low flow. Green water says light plus nutrients met at the wrong moment. Identification turns frustration into a plan you can execute. Second, you saw that prevention is not complicated. Lock the day on a timer. Feed to behavior, not habit. Export waste with a steady routine of wiping, pruning, vacuuming, and water changes. Keep filters breathing, flow even, and dead zones erased. These are small moves that stack into long-term control. Third, you practiced fast resets that do not backfire. Scrape, twirl, peel, and siphon with intent, then export what you lifted so it does not dissolve back into fuel. Trim slow leaves that are past saving. Service the filter a day later. Keep livestock calm with steady motions and good aeration. Fourth, you recruited allies that never clock out. Otocinclus polishing leaves. Neurites patrolling glass. Amano shrimp gathering on hairy clumps. A cleanup crew is not a shortcut, but when the system is balanced, they cut maintenance down to a pleasant rhythm. Fifth, you use tools without leaning on them. Liquid carbon as a precise spot dab. Peroxide as a careful oxidizer. Ultraviolet as a clear fix for pea soup water. Antibiotics as a measured end to persistent cyanobacteria after flow and hygiene are corrected. Each one has a narrow job. You chose the right tool at the right time for the right reason. Sixth, you gave plants the lead role. Heavy planting, steady feeding, and stable carbon turn nutrients into leaves instead of fuzz. Pruning becomes export. Shade becomes strategy. Strong growth crowds algae out before it starts. Finally, you wrapped it all into a plan you can repeat. Baseline snapshot, stable day, weekly rhythm, clear thresholds that trigger action, targeted playbooks when a specific issue appears, notes and photos so you learn your tank's patterns rather than guessing. This is how a living aquarium stays beautiful with less effort month after month. If this documentary helped you take back that balance, I would love your support. Like the video so others can find it. Subscribe for more deep dives into the science and craft of freshwater aquariums. Share your own wins and lessons in the comments so the whole community benefits. Thank you for spending this hour with me. Keep the routine steady, keep the system honest, and enjoy the clear water and lively behavior that follow.